what happened in Venezuela. For those who do not know, over the weekend, me personally, I woke up on Saturday to my my phone just blowing up. People ask me all these different questions about what are you seeing the news, what is going on. But the United States struck Venezuela, specifically in the Caracas area, and was able to successfully extract Maduro back to the United States, and apparently Maduro's wife as well, to face our judicial system. So, before I turn it over to Matt to kind of talk about what this means from a broader geopolitical perspective, I think for me, a couple things that stuck out were from the technological side. Number one, if you have not heard, the Caracas had a complete blackout. So the United States was able to cut power to the entire region. Uh, so if you're looking into that, you're looking into these industrial power controls. You're looking into how they're actually securing their power networks. Um, I want to say mid-December, there's a few cybersecurity briefings saying that there was a large-scale attack that happened to some Latin American energy facilities. For me, here at Build, I do also oversee our cybersecurity, so that's interesting to look at. And I think that's a breadcrumb along the way to see what was going on here. Secondarily, uh, the Cloudflare, which is a network security and kind of cloud infrastructure company, they also published a piece a couple days ago about noticing what are called BGP inconsistencies. So that's how your ISP, your internet provider, connects to other internet providers. This was all kind of in that Venezuela area. So again, you're seeing the United States utilizing tech and cyber espionage, cyber attacks to actually help with this extraction. And then finally, I think, which is the broader, it kind of ties into the geopolitical piece, is that Venezuela and China share a lot of technology, right? So China provides Venezuela with different um, uh, defense systems, missile systems, etc. There are reports that some of those maybe didn't work or were able to be jammed. So a lot to look at from that perspective. So again, we're not trying to make this a military and tech podcast, but definitely there's some things that are advancing on that front that I think are important to call out because it does kind of tie into our broader themes around AI, and you're hearing a lot with defense companies, Trump's kind of directives to those CEOs, etc. So that's enough for me. I want to turn it over to Matt here. Matt, you're able to see kind of the economic take here. So maybe walk me through, what you're seeing and why Venezuela is maybe a more important piece of the picture than a lot of people are realizing.
Yep. Thanks, Cameron. That's a good summary of the how. And I think one of the things one of my takeaways out of this weekend was just how, I guess what I'd say, mechanically precise this action was. If you think about, these things, there's a million ways they can go wrong, Black Hawk Down type of disasters. And if you just want to talk about competence in terms of execution, this was like flawless. I know there's a lot of, from an outside observer standpoint, I know there's a lot of, you know, knee-jerk reactions. Hey, was this regime change? All of that stuff. I'll give my perspective in a second. But in terms of like just the operation itself, this reflects like months of prep work to come in and just get this coordinated action executed across, I guess, the Department of War and Department of State to realize this outcome. Now, I think the immediate knee-jerk reaction in the media sphere, views this just like any other kind of regime change operation of the U.S. military, for example, Iraq, Afghanistan, et cetera, or say like an intelligence-directed regime change operation, something like the Bay of Pigs, going after
Yep.
Fidel Castro, trying to flip, regime change, et cetera, like some type of economic activity like that. What I would view this as, like, just take it, 2025 framework. Remember when we saw the Argentina currency swap in October, It was really a huge catalyst as far as moving the players to their next move. Unfreezing everybody from a just dead standstill as terms of how this geopolitical chess game is going to progress. That currency swap, or the U.S. basically came in with or U.S. Treasury came in with the liquidity lifeboat for fully collateralized swap agreements, basically allowing the Malay administration and regime the backing it needed to go into elections with momentum and come away with a larger congressional majority behind the Liberty Advances, political movement that's been basically just gaining traction for the last 4 or 5 years. If you think about what did that net out to, just the outcome wise, what that was bringing in Argentina into the U.S.-led new Western Hemisphere orbit. Now take that same framework, apply it to this build up towards what's going on in Venezuela. What materialized in terms of the climax Friday night, Saturday morning with the Maduro extraction. What we're seeing here, I don't view this as necessarily a total regime change per se, same way that Argentina wasn't a regime change. What's actually going on here is a very carefully executed, I guess, implementation of now Venezuela into that Western Hemisphere orbit, which is led or being led by Washington, D.C., and I would say the capital faction in New York City. Given what's going on, the Mamdani administration coming to power in New York on over the weekend as well. I don't know that New York City is on the same page as Washington, D.C. anymore, but that one is left to play out in the future. But that's how I view this Venezuela operation. This is, I would say, the climax, at least the end of the beginning, but there's a whole lot that's going to go on from here as these core trends continue to develop. So that's kind of how I view this. Start with this, it's a dollar story, right? And also a control and flow of resource commodities story as well. With this play, all of the resource economies, let's say, what's been heavily talked about, Venezuela's oil reserves, the heavy crude, all of that, not just the energy resources, but also the metals, the silver, et cetera. Those now come under control of that Western Hemisphere financial orbit, right? So who's the on the other side of that, right? If there's a winner, there has to be a loser. Well, you'd be looking to the other regional spheres of influence who had roles in the area. And basically that was everybody, right? EU or Europe, UK, Russia, China. This, like Venezuela, for at least the last 20 years, ever since the Hugo Chavez administration or leadership came into power, going through Maduro, I mean, it's basically just been a hornet's nest for all of these regional powers, just kind of duking it out and running everything from human trafficking operations, drug exports, resource exports, all of that was just running out of Venezuela. Basically, the way I view this is the Western Hemisphere essentially coordinating together, Northern and North America, South America, and basically just saying, like, get out, foreign influence. Doesn't necessarily mean that we're hostile to those foreign regional spheres. It just means that we're not going to sit by. When I say we here, America, and I think what this viewpoint stands for, the Donroe Doctrine, if you will. It's like the rest of us, the whole Western Hemisphere. We're not going to just sit back and let ourselves be basically infiltrated and run through by foreign influence anymore. So that's what's going on. That's the way I interpret this. Now we get into the financial implications as well as what this means for the real economy. I think this is where the analysis gets really interesting. So observation here, you see this in the Kobayashi letter. It's kind of a new media, let's say a social media financial reporting outlet. Posted here the Caracas Stock Exchange chart, and you see this on the announcement on Friday night, Saturday morning of what took place. just like a rip. What is that? Like we're looking at basically from 1500 to 25, 2600. We're talking like a 40% gain, like just in a very compressed time frame. This is like if you zoom out and look at the charts of the Venezuelan stock market during the hyperinflation itself, that's really gone haywire since the early 2010s, right? Maduro's entire tenure, if you will. Um, the whole thing just goes exponential. It's a melt up in itself, but like Saturday night or Saturday, like on this news, it's a melt up on top of a melt up. What's going on here? Keep in mind, like the index on the y-axis, it's not dollars, right? This is local currency. This is the bolivar, which just keeps, they add on a zero and essentially you do a reverse stock split to make your units not go into the quadrillions, right? Which is where these hyperinflations go. What this reflects is that those or not dollars, but that local currency, the holders of that cash or that money, if you will, it is trying to flee into an asset where it can preserve its purchasing power. So number one place this would go, you look for equities, real property, you could say Bitcoin, et cetera. So you have seen a lift. You can go look at the Bitcoin chart since Jan 1. Um, this is capital or savings trying to flee and find solid ground because what this is telling you is the bolivar is not long for this world. So that old world, whatever the regime was, everything going on since the 2010s in terms of trying to patch together a financial system mainly run by foreign powers or under the influence of foreign influence or foreign powers. That game is over, right? So this is basically that capital looking for the lifeboats. Um,
Yeah.
so what's going to go on here, right? So key part of this, I mean, essentially view this story. Venezuela joins Argentina, and then if you look up the western coast of the elections over the last, let's say, 12 to 18 months, you've seen kind of aligned governments winning election. Chile, I want to say Peru, Ecuador, they've flipped towards presidencies that are favorable to this viewpoint, which is really being led by figures like Trump, Hegseth, Rubio, etc. They're on board. Venezuela joins the club here. Doesn't necessarily come through a popular election like Argentina or those others I mentioned, because Venezuela is fundamentally like a government or a a failed state that's not to the same level of social order that those others in South America have been. But that's the way I view this story, the consolidation into the Western Hemisphere. So, in terms of goods, what's going to happen here and trade? You've seen at the press conference on Saturday afternoon, Donald Trump made the statement that Venezuela is going to export, approximately like oil of value, current market prices, basically $2.8 billion to U.S. refineries, which are located around the Gulf Coast, to process the heavy crude. Um,
I,
see
I thought the
the
important
little
piece here was
Chiron.
you actually called out Trafigura here. Maybe could you
Exactly.
explain
Yeah.
why did that kind of pop out to you?
Yeah. So in the last few weeks episode, we talked about the commodity trading houses, right? And most of these are under the domicile or registration, like whose flag are they flying essentially in shipping terms, right? And these are the firms that move um, the raw commodity, right? The actual hard things. They put them in boats and they move them from production or source of supply to their endpoint port or market for ultimate demand, right? So that's what these commodity trading houses do. See in the Chiron here, energy trader Trafigura to talk with U.S. over Venezuelan oil. This is a key tell. This is like this is where the rubber meets the road here. Who's going to get the resources? Where is it going to go? Trafigura, they're a Swiss registered player. but they're domiciled out of Singapore. So really, a key element of this is exports or access for the Asian economy or sphere of influence, which is fast growing, right? In the post World War II, time frame, needs access to these, to this heavy crude for fuels, et cetera. It also needs the metal access, silver. Look at the
Right.
charts, everything going on in silver. We won't get into it here. We talked about it 2 weeks ago on our last episode of 2025, I believe. That's what's going on here. So these commodity trading houses, um, will be heavily involved in this process here of who is going to have access of these resource commodities, which are vital for everybody, right? But what's crystal clear here in this with this action on Saturday morning with Maduro, U.S. is in control of the commodities, which also means they're under like the financial control more explicitly. So I think that's a key tell here. Venezuela is now going to be a trade partner of the U.S. under this new kind of framework or onboarding into the economic coalition. And on the other side of that, those $2.8 billion worth of oil exports to the United States, and this Trump tweet from this is yesterday.
Yep.
He's announcing Venezuela is going to be purchasing only American-made products with those deals. So number one, you got to be able to enforce it. Those dollars have to only go towards American produced products. So what does that mean? Agricultural, medicines, medical devices, electrical equipment, energy equipment. Um, things like capital goods, things like that. So it's really setting up Venezuela or integrating Venezuela into the kind of Gulf of America and Caribbean Sea trading bloc, which has been kind of fractured, right? They've operated as two separate things for a while, right? I don't know when you go, you could say Cuba would have been a big split.
Right.
Um, but they've never actually been integrated and they were basically decoupled for all of the 2010s. Those two things are reintegrating now, that nexus between the North America and South America. So that's what's going on. How do you tie it all together? This is where you start rolling back the tape. What were all the key headlines we saw in 2024, or sorry, 2025? We just did a year change. Apologies for this. It's hard to get it right until we get used to the fact that we're in 2026. It takes a while. We're still only on 8 days into 2026, so bear with me. Remember the key story from June in 2025, the Genius Act, right? The U.S. now has a regulatory standard, how these dollar stablecoins are going to work, issuance guidelines, all of that. Do not be surprised. Actually, say expect would be another way to say it. That all of these flows, the payment for that trade of goods, oil exports going to the U.S. How do you enforce that those dollars are going towards U.S. manufactured goods or produced goods? This is where the Genius Act stablecoins come in, right? It's almost too good to be true. Um, and then those stable coins, what are they holding? What are they backed by on the back end? They have to be backed one for one with US Treasury
Treasuries.
bills.
Yep.
So now, as you go into 2026, you've got two sources that we know of who are going to support the US federal government deficits from a short term bills issuance standpoint. Number one, you've got the Fed, which is flipped over from QE to QT. You've even got RMPs, reserve management purchases, going into effect. But now, what you look at, the more trade, takes place between U.S. and Venezuela, both directions. You could probably say this for the rest of South America too, but the more that trend ramps up, the more stablecoin issuance you're going to see, which is basically just, you could view this as you're bypassing the offshore dollar banks, so European banks, HSBC, Standard Chartered, BNP Paribas, et cetera, Banco Santander. You go down to South America, those are the banks you'll see a lot of, at the airports. You won't necessarily see a lot of, the U.S. Household name banks. JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Citi, et cetera. They're only just starting, I think, to build up their market share in South America. But how they do it, basically this Genius Act stablecoins um, gives the U.S. Banking and financial system a new tool to bypass the legacy euro dollar or offshore dollar system. And basically, what that is it's a territory or it's a acquisition, right? It's a market acquisition of old colonial powers or foreign banks from the U.S. perspective being ceded to the U.S. banking system and the Western Hemisphere's own players. So keep watching this. How do you know whether this trend is continuing to take off? Look at the market caps, right? So you got Tether, which is your market leader. Right now, it's almost $190 billion of issuance. Tether is not a Genius Act compliant stablecoin right now. It has time to come into regulatory compliance to fully reserve its stablecoin dollar denominated liabilities with T-bills, but it's not doing that quite yet. According to its accounting statements it releases on a monthly basis
And it'll be a separate coin most
from
likely
BDO.
too. Yep.
Could be, yeah. Keep watching, but you should expect this trend to keep going up and to the right if what we're talking about is actually playing out. And the other one, USDC under Circle, which IPO'd in 2025 last summer as well, after Genius, right about with Genius in June. You see that one, the issuance moving up and to the right as well. It's about $75 billion right now. So if you look from 2024 to 2025, the rate of growth here for Circle, from north of, let's say, 25 billion dollar market cap range, at the bottom at the beginning of 2024, it's it's basically tripled, right, to $75 billion. So if this trend is playing out, like, how will you know this economic integration is moving smoothly from here, let's say, and the merger and acquisition is going well? You would watch for these numbers to keep going up and to the right, would be how I would look at this. All right, so that's that. That's Venezuela. I think that's where we'll leave it for right now, but it's not the end of that story. I'd say it's really just the climax of the first phase, and now we're on to the real story, which is the economic integration of North and South America as trading partners, which I don't think we've ever fully had, right, in history from colonial times. So this is new territory, I think, from the historical records standpoint.